Today on Horror Mike's Pre-Code Horror Comic Book General Hospital, Horror Mike tries to save Forbidden Worlds. Greetings, friend. Today we're looking at issue number 24 of Forbidden Worlds with a nice Ken Bald cover. Pierre, don't you know me? It's Roxanne. You're Roxanne. No, get away from me. Ah! And as you can see, it kind of looks pretty good. I'm going to slide it on in there. A pretty solid copy. I'm going to turn it over. However, there is an issue. The cover is separated from the comic book. So today on Horror Mike's Pre-Code Horror Comic Book General Hospital, we're going to go into surgery and see if we can fix this little problem. First off, as far as the cover goes, when I received the book, it had already been taped together with transparent mending tissue. You can probably see there. I'm going to bring it in. Now, you will note that where the staples were, there are still holes. They did not cover those. I'm going to cover those, folks. And then I'm going to carefully cover them as well on the back with very, very slim strips of mending tissue. That is number one. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. You can see on your screen a few tools that I have for this job. Of course, a small box cutter with a new blade. If you're going to do stuff like this, always start with a fresh blade. This, of course, a pair of mini needle nose pliers, absolutely necessary for this work, as we will see. Also a mini screwdriver. Oh yes, a flathead. Possibly scissors. I brought them along. And another pair of pliers, which may or may not come into play. We're going to find out. But first, folks, here is the mending tissue on a roll. So now we have this piece. Now the next deal is to remove the tissue from its backing. And then what we're going to do is cut this right down the middle. You don't want a wide piece, so we can easily use half of this on one side and half on the other. So I'm going to lay this right over the hole on the bottom staple hole. I'm going to take the second piece and do the exact same thing. To the top staple hole. Okay, so now what has happened is we've got both staple holes covered, and now you want to burnish the tape, kind of get it in there really well so it makes a nice bond on both. I'm just using the dull end of this box cutter, which is really good because it's smooth. It's smooth plastic. You can roll it right over the tape and get it in there very well. And there you go. Not a problem. Since we're going to put it on the opposite side here, we're going to see a little bit of tape. But you can't really do anything else because you have to double the tape where the staples are to make a nice strong bond. Otherwise, if it's just one piece of the mending tissue on either side, I don't think it's going to be strong enough to hold the comic book. So that's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. I'm going to cut off another piece here. Once again, you want to cut very narrow strips because you don't want this stuff showing up, folks. That's the whole thing. You don't really want it to show too much on the comic book because this is going to be exposed. I'm going right over that sucker. I'm favoring the back, but of course covering, making sure that we have now two pieces that have come together at the staple hole. That's the key, because if you don't, you're not going to have a strong bond. And most of the tape is on the back, so there you go. And we do the same to the top. Up here, I'm going to be once again trying to favor the backside, which I have successfully. I will try to show you what I've just done here as soon as I get this worked in. Just be careful that you're not doing this on the comic book itself, that you're only affecting the tape portion. When I close the book, well, you can't really see it because 80% of it is actually on the back. The comic book cover is now ready. The next point, of course, is going to be removing the staples from the comic book itself. I love the splash page. Check it out. Of course, it relates to the cover. Love me forever. So I'm going to go to the centerfold. Now, the centerfold is where, of course, you have the staples, right? And this is where we're going to remove the staples. For this, I am going to use I'm going to start this with the mini screwdriver. Now, the reason why I want to start with the mini screwdriver is just to get the staple up, right? That's all. It's probably going to cause a little stress, maybe a little bit of damage, because you've got to lift up the staples. There's no doubt about that. So now I'm taking the needle nose pliers and holding one end of the staple while I work the other. And it's very important to keep the staple legs at a 90-degree angle to the back of the staple, right? Because you want to just easily pull that out and then be able to put it back in. This is quite crucial, okay? So that's what I'm doing right now. And make sure that the legs, the staple legs, as I call them, are parallel with themselves. Now that looks pretty good. And what we're going to do now, of course, is kind of lift the book like this. And what we want to do is tap the staples out of the book. And there we go. I've just removed one of the staples, as you can see, from the top. Now I'm tapping the other one. Easily comes out. You want to remember to not move the staples again, because you want to put the bottom staple back in the bottom area, and of course the top staple in the top. Last but not least, we're going to need a small needle. So you have the comic book, you got the comic book cover. So we're placing the cover back with the comic book itself. We're lining it up where it originally was. The one thing you're going to need are guiding holes through the mending tissue. And in my opinion, the only way to do that is to carefully insert the needle through the top hole and then carefully through the mending tissue on the comic book cover. I've just done that. I don't know if you can see that. I'm going to move that back and forth. Thus, now we have a hole, folks. Oh, yes, we have the top hole. And I'm going to Do the exact same thing with the bottom hole. There it is. The next step is to attach the top staple first, because once that's attached, the book and interior aren't going anywhere. They are there, and it's theoretically going to be easier to work on the bottom staple. Okay, so I'm going to lift the cover first. And the staple is now in, folks. Now I have the staple fully inserted. That's what she said. Into both the comic book cover and the comic book itself. So I'm going to once again rely on first my finger just to kind of give the staple a little bit of a nudge down. And there you go, folks. Top staple. You can see that is now reattached, and through two pieces of mending tissue, one thin piece on the outside and one on the inside. Cover has been doubly reinforced, okay, in doubly, okay, that's what I'm saying right now. And the staple appears to be pretty good, pretty much the way it was. I am penetrating the hole, folks. Always good when you get good hole penetration. The staple has gone through. So now the idea, of course, is that I'm going to bend these staples down gently, closer to the page, and then I will use the small screwdriver to flatten them out. And there we go. Now there was a little bit of trauma closing that bottom one. Not bad though, really. I mean, I can show you it's not much different than what it was. But there's a little bit of, this trauma from closing it. But guess what, folks? See the way that is now. Reconnected this comic book with the original staples, which means technically that according to CGC, there is no restoration. That is just repair. For some reason, if you glue the spine to the comic book cover, that's considered restoration, but it's glue. I mean, I'm just using archival mending tissue, which is, I believe, cellulose, glue on cellulose. You know what I'm saying? It's like tape, which is glue on cellulose. So I'm really not quite sure what the difference is. If you have archival glue, it doesn't discolor the comic book. If you have archival mending tape, it doesn't discolor the comic book. So I'm not quite sure what the difference is, but I can tell you this much. I used the original staples on this. It is securely attached to the comic book now. If you open up the comic book, you can see clearly that the spine has been mended together, right? And then you can, of course, also see that the cover has been placed back on with the taped spine. So it is obvious that the cover was separated from this book, and now it is back on the book with the original staples, granted, and no glue. So would CGC look at this as not being restored, just repaired? I think it's going to hold together. So there you go, folks, a repaired Forbidden Worlds number 24 by yours truly, Horror Mike. And this is my first stab at this. I figured I'd give it a try. I'll tell you, this comic book is, it's a low-end comic book in the first place. It's, not worth that much. I believe I paid $60 for it. So it wasn't like I was sweating bullets doing this, right? Now, if it was a $500 comic book, well, I would never have one because I never afford to buy a $500 comic book, but let's say it was a $200 comic book with the same problem. I don't know if I could bring myself to do it. So these are the instruments of the day, folks. Your mini needle nose pliers, fantastic, and a mini screwdriver. Those are the two biggest things. Of course, the archival mending tissue is necessary. The needle right there, folks, absolutely necessary for making holes into the archival mending tissue on the spine of the comic book cover in order to reinsert the original staples. I can read this sucker now with all the confidence in the world that the cover is not going to pop off in my hand. There you go, Forbidden Worlds number 24, repaired by Horror Mike. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, please like and subscribe. Thank you.